They called humans the broken species, too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous for galactic civilization. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Council kept Earth under strict quarantine, monitoring our every move through orbital stations, convinced that one day we would destroy ourselves and spare them the trouble of deciding our fate. They were wrong about the destroying ourselves part. They were catastrophically wrong about everything else. When a Zephyrian hegemony's war fleets darkened 1,000 skies across Council space, when their bioweapons turned entire worlds into graveyards, when their psychic warriors shattered the minds of the galaxy's greatest defenders, the Council faced extinction. In their desperation, they turned to the one species they had spent centuries trying to forget, the supposedly broken humans of Earth. Major Matthew Ridgway had been waiting his entire military career for this moment. Not the moment when aliens would beg for human help. He never imagined that. But the moment when everything he'd trained for, everything he'd learned about warfare and human resilience, would be put to the ultimate test. The Council expected Earth to send diplomats, scientists, maybe a few token warships to show good faith. Instead, they got Ridgway and the Second Human Expeditionary Force. The galaxy was about to learn why humans don't just fight wars, they perfect them. And Major Ridgway was about to teach the universe's most advanced civilizations that sometimes being broken is exactly what you need to fix an impossible situation. Major Matthew Ridgway stood at the observation deck of the Human Defense Command Station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The blue marble that had birthed humanity looked peaceful from orbit, but Matthew knew better. Every continent below buzzed with military preparation, factories working around the clock, and millions of people training for a war they had never imagined possible. The communication console behind him chimed with an incoming transmission. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the elongated, crystalline features of Ambassador Veltar, one of the Galactic Council's senior diplomats. The alien's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of desperation that even Matthew could read across species barriers. Major Ridgway. Veltar's voice carried through the translator with mechanical precision, though undertones of urgency bled through. The Council requires your immediate presence at Nexus Station. The situation has deteriorated beyond our most pessimistic projections. Matthew turned from the viewport, his weathered face reflecting years of military service. At 42, he had served in 3 different conflicts on Earth, each one teaching him something new about human warfare and resilience. His dark eyes, sharp with intelligence and hardened by experience, focused on the hologram. Ambassador, with respect, the situation deteriorated the moment your people decided humans were too dangerous for galactic society. We've been preparing for 3 centuries while you kept us locked behind your quarantine barriers. Now you need us. Matthew's voice carried no malice, just the cold assessment of a professional soldier. Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what Matthew had learned was the equivalent of a wince. Major, I understand your sentiment. However, the Zephyrian hegemony has conquered 14 Council worlds in the past solar month. Their bioweapons are unlike anything we have encountered. Traditional warfare has proven ineffective against their tactics. The hologram shifted, showing tactical displays that made Matthew's blood run cold. Entire planets rendered lifeless, their populations converted into grotesque biomechanical constructs that served the Zephyrian war machine. Cities that had stood for millennia reduced to organic processing centers. The scale of destruction was staggering, even by human standards of warfare. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them, Veltar continued. Their psychic warriors can predict our battle plans through precognitive abilities. Our greatest military minds have been systematically eliminated or driven insane by their mental attacks. We are losing this war, Major Ridgway. Matthew studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The Zephyrians fought like nothing he had ever seen, combining biological warfare, psychic attacks, and adaptive technology in ways that seemed almost supernatural. But As he analyzed their patterns, he began to see something the Council had missed. They're not adapting to your weapons, Ambassador. They're adapting to your thinking. Look at these battle reports. Every Council strategy follows predictable patterns. Mathematical precision, logical deployment, minimal casualties prioritized over tactical advantage. You fight like administrators. Veltar's form shifted again, this time in what Matthew recognized as confusion. I did not understand. Logical warfare is efficient warfare. Why would we approach conflict any differently? Because war isn't logical, Ambassador. War is chaos given direction by will. Your species have spent so long at peace that you've forgotten the fundamental truth about conflict. Sometimes the illogical choice is the right choice because your enemy can't predict it. The communication channel remained silent for several moments. Matthew could see Veltar processing this concept, trying to fit it into the orderly frameworks that govern Council thinking. It was like watching someone try to solve a puzzle with pieces that kept changing shape. The Council has authorized me to offer humanity full membership status and access to galactic technology in exchange for military assistance. Veltar finally said, "Your quarantine will be lifted permanently." Matthew almost laughed. 3 centuries of isolation, of being treated like dangerous children, and now they wanted to make humans full citizens because they needed soldiers. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. What you're offering, Ambassador, is what should have been ours by right 300 years ago. But that's politics, and I'm a soldier. What matters now is stopping these Zephyrians before they turn the entire galaxy into their feeding ground. He moved to his command console, pulling up Earth's military readiness reports. The numbers were impressive. Humanity had not wasted their centuries of quarantine. If anything, being cut off from galactic civilization had forced them to become more innovative, more self-reliant, and infinitely more dangerous. I'll need complete tactical intelligence on every engagement with the Zephyrians. Battle recordings, casualty reports, capture technology, everything. I also need specifications on their bioweapons and detailed analysis of their psychic capabilities. Major, surely you do not intend to engage such a formidable enemy without Council support and coordination? Veltar's tone carried genuine concern. Ambassador, I intend to engage them the way humans engage every enemy, by hitting them where they don't expect it, with weapons they've never seen, using tactics they can't predict because they've never encountered a species crazy enough to try them. Matthew began entering commands into his console, activating communication protocols that would reach every human military installation from Luna Base to the Outer System defense platforms. The Second Human Expeditionary Force had been training for this moment for decades, even if they hadn't known exactly what they were training for. There's something else you need to understand about humans, Ambassador. We don't just fight to win wars. We fight to make sure our enemies regret starting them. The Zephyrians have made a mistake that species across this galaxy have been warning you about for centuries. What mistake is that, Major? They've given humanity a reason to leave Earth. The holographic display showed Veltar's crystalline form shifting through several emotional states. Fear, hope, uncertainty, and something that might have been relief all flickered across the alien's features. The Council convenes in 6 hours. Transport has been arranged for your arrival at Nexus Station. I'll be there, Ambassador. But understand that once humans enter this war, we finish it our way. That might mean doing things that your civilized species find disturbing. War crimes by your standards might be Tuesday by ours. Major, the Council simply requires victory against the Zephyrian threat. Then, the Council is going to get exactly what it asked for. The transmission ended, leaving Matthew alone with his thoughts and the slowly rotating Earth below. He activated his personal communication system, connecting directly to General Harrison at Earth Defense Command. Sir, the call has come in. The Council wants us to clean up their mess. General Harrison's gruff voice filled the command center. About damn time. How bad is it, Matthew? Bad enough that they're offering full galactic citizenship and technology sharing. The Zephyrians are turning entire worlds into biomechanical processing centers. Psychic warriors, adaptive technology, the works. Sounds like Tuesday. What's our deployment window? Matthew smiled grimly. This was why he loved working with career military personnel. No panic, no lengthy discussions about implications, just immediate focus on the tactical situation. I'm heading to Nexus Station in 6 hours for full briefing. Recommend we prep the 2nd Expeditionary for immediate deployment. Full spectrum warfare package, including the experimental units. The experimental units? Harrison's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Matthew, you know those haven't been field tested. Sir, if we're going up against psychic aliens with bioweapons, untested human technology sounds like exactly the right level of insanity for the job. Approved. I'll have the 2nd ready for deployment within 48 hours. Try not to start an interstellar incident before then. No promises, sir. As the communication ended, Matthew returned to the observation deck. Earth continued its ancient rotation, unchanged by the momentous events unfolding around it. But humanity was about to step onto a galactic stage in a way no one had anticipated. The Zephyrians had conquered 14 worlds using fear, biological warfare, and psychic manipulation. They had defeated the galaxy's most advanced civilizations through superior adaptation and unpredictable tactics. They were about to discover that humans had been perfecting unpredictable tactics since before they learned to use fire. And unlike the orderly, logical species of the Galactic Council, humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. Matthew began reviewing the preliminary reports Veltar had transmitted. Each engagement showed the same pattern. Council forces deploying in predictable formations, using logical tactics, being systematically outmaneuvered and destroyed by an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. But as he studied the data, Matthew began to see opportunities. The Zephyrians were indeed adaptive, but their adaptation followed patterns. They analyzed enemy behavior, predicted logical responses, and prepared countermeasures accordingly. It was an incredibly sophisticated approach to warfare. It was also completely unprepared for human logic. Matthew activated his personal files, scrolling through centuries of human military history. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off an army of thousands through sheer bloody-minded refusal to retreat. Stalingrad, where humans fought for every room of every building in a city that no longer existed. Normandy, where the logical impossibility of the landing was precisely what made it work. Humans didn't fight the wars they could win. They fought the wars they had to win, and then figured out how to make victory possible through sheer stubborn determination and tactical insanity. The Zephyrians were about to get a very unpleasant education in human warfare. The communication console chimed again. This time, it was Colonel Sarah Chun, commander of the 2nd Expeditionary Special Operations Division. Her Asian features were set in the same professional mask that Matthew had perfected over years of military service. Major, I've been reviewing the intelligence package from the Council. These Zephyrians are nasty pieces of work. Your assessment, Colonel? They fight smart, but they fight like machines. Everything is calculated, optimized, predictable once you understand their parameters. They've been winning because they're fighting civilized opponents. And we're not civilized. Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Sir, we're the species that invented chemical weapons, nuclear bombs, and tactical orbital bombardment. We're the species that fights wars by making the cost of victory so high that surrender looks reasonable. We're not civilized. We're domesticated. There's a difference. What's your recommendation for engagement protocols? Full spectrum chaos, sir. Hit them with everything they've never seen before. Biological warfare, psychological operations, tactical nuclear deployment, and a few surprises from the experimental division. Make them adapt to so many different threats simultaneously that their systems overload. Matthew nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of thinking that separated human military doctrine from the orderly approaches favored by Council species. Where other civilizations sought to minimize chaos and control variables, humans had learned to weaponize uncertainty itself. Colonel, begin preparing Operation Prometheus. Full deployment authority for all experimental weapon systems. If we're going to introduce humanity to galactic warfare, we might as well make a memorable first impression. Understood, sir. The aliens wanted humanity unleashed. They're about to discover what that actually means. As the various communication channels closed, Major Matthew Ridgway stood alone in the command center, watching Earth turn beneath him. Somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, an enemy was systematically destroying everything the galactic community had built over millennia. They thought they understood warfare. They thought they had mastered the art of conflict through superior adaptation and technological advantage. They had never faced humans, and humanity was about to remind the galaxy why some species are kept behind quarantine barriers, not to protect them from the universe, but to protect the universe from them. Nexus Station stretched across the void like a crystalline metropolis, its bioorganic architecture pulsing with the soft bioluminescence that the Council species found soothing. To Major Matthew Ridgway, stepping off the human transport shuttle, it looked like something that had grown rather than been built, which, according to his briefings, was exactly what had happened. The docking bay hummed with nervous energy. Dozens of different alien species moved through the space with barely controlled panic. Matthew recognized several from his xenobiology training. The tall, ethereal Velnari with their translucent skin, the heavily armored Korvax whose natural carapaces have been augmented with technological implants, the gaseous Phaeton contained within their environmental suits. All of them moved with the jerky, uncertain motions of people who had never been truly afraid before. Ambassador Veltar approached across the crystalline floor, his usual diplomatic composure cracked like ice under pressure. Behind him walked three other figures that Matthew immediately pegged as military. Their posture, their movements, their constant environmental awareness all screamed professional soldier despite their alien nature. Major Ridgway, thank you for coming so quickly. Allow me to introduce High Commander Zefkar of the Korvax Defense Fleet, Admiral THYSS of the Velnari Star Navy, and Strategic Coordinator Hummel of the Phaeton Collective. Matthew studied each of them with professional interest. High Commander Zefkar stood nearly 8 feet tall, his natural arthropod carapace enhanced with biomechanical upgrades that probably included combat systems. Admiral THYSS moved with the fluid grace of an aquatic species, her large eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Strategic Coordinator Hummel's environmental suit gave no indication of the being within, but the suit itself was equipped with multiple sensor arrays and communication devices. Gentlemen and Admiral, Matthew nodded to each in turn. I understand you have a problem that needs solving. High Commander Zefkar's mandibles clicked in what Matthew's training identified as agitation. Major Ridgway, the situation has deteriorated beyond our most pessimistic projections. The Zephyrians have not merely conquered 14 worlds. They have fundamentally altered them. What were once thriving civilizations are now biomechanical processing centers serving their war machine. Admiral THYSS gestured toward a holographic display that materialized in the center of their group. The image showed a world that had once been green and blue, now covered in sprawling organic structures that pulsed with sickly light. This was Thymon Prime, she said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. Home to 12 billion Velnari. The Zephyrians conquered it in 6 hours. Within 48 hours, they had converted the entire population into biomechanical constructs, serving their military infrastructure. Matthew studied the display with professional detachment. The organic structures were clearly technological, but they followed biological patterns rather than mechanical ones. It was like looking at a cancer that had learned to build weapons. Show me the battle recordings. The holographic display shifted, showing the final engagement over the Thymon Prime. Matthew watched as the Velnari defense fleet deployed in perfect formations, their tactics textbook examples of military precision. They identified enemy weaknesses, exploited tactical advantages, and executed maneuvers with mathematical efficiency. The Zephyrians tore them apart anyway. "Your fleet commanders fought well," Matthew said finally. "They also fought exactly like I would expect them to fight based on everything I know about Council military doctrine." Strategic Coordinator Hummel's environmental suit speakers crackled with static. "Explain your meaning, Major. You fight like you've been at peace for so long that war has become a theoretical exercise. Every formation is optimized, every maneuver calculated, every decision based on logical analysis of probable outcomes. It's beautiful. It's also completely predictable." High Commander Zefkar's carapace plates shifted, a sign of defensive posture. "Are you suggesting our military doctrine is flawed?" "I'm suggesting your military doctrine is designed for fighting civilized opponents who follow the same rules you do. The Zephyrians aren't civilized, and they're not following any rules except winning at any cost." Matthew gestured at the tactical display. "Look at this engagement. Your admiral deploys his fleet in a defensive screen designed to protect civilian evacuation routes while maintaining tactical flexibility. It's brilliant strategy against an opponent who cares about minimizing casualties and preserving infrastructure." The display highlighted various elements of the battle as Matthew continued his analysis. "The Zephyrians ignore your defensive positions and attack the evacuation ships directly. They don't care about tactical advantage or strategic position. They care about converting your population into resources. When you redeploy to protect the civilians, they hit your now exposed flanks with biological weapons that turn your own crews against you." Admiral Tetris's large eyes focused on Matthew with uncomfortable intensity. "How would humans approach such a scenario differently? We wouldn't have given them the chance to land on the planet in the first place." The holographic display shifted at Matthew's gesture, showing the same system, but with different tactical markers. Human doctrine would have deployed everything from nuclear mines to biological warfare agents throughout this system the moment we detected an approaching enemy fleet. We would have evacuated the civilians to hardened bunkers, not transport ships. And we would have fought the engagement not to preserve the infrastructure, but to make the cost of victory so high that the enemy regrets attacking us. That would result in massive civilian casualties, Strategic Coordinator Hummel observed. Maybe it would also result in a still-breathing civilian population instead of 12 billion biomechanical constructs serving our enemies. The uncomfortable silence that followed told Matthew everything he needed to know about the fundamental difference between human and Council approaches to warfare. The Council fought to minimize damage. Humans fought to maximize enemy suffering. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features shifted through several configurations before settling on what Matthew had learned indicated resignation. "Major, the Council has authorized you to deploy human forces as you see fit. We require immediate tactical victories to halt Zephyrian expansion while our strategic planners develop long-term solutions." "Ambassador, there are no long-term solutions if we don't survive the short term. What's the current tactical situation?" The holographic display expanded, showing a three-dimensional map of Council space with red zones indicating Zephyrian conquest and yellow zones showing active conflicts. The pattern was clear. The enemy was expanding along multiple vectors simultaneously, overwhelming Council defenses through sheer operational tempo. 17 worlds are currently under active assault, Admiral THYSS reported. "Our projections indicate that without immediate intervention, all 17 will fall within the next standard month." Matthew studied the tactical display with growing appreciation for the complexity of the situation. The Zephyrians weren't just conquering randomly. They were targeting specific worlds based on strategic value, resource availability, and defensive capacity. It was a methodical campaign designed to maximize resource acquisition while minimizing their own losses. "What's our available response capability?" High Commander Zefkar gestured, and new markers appeared on the display. The Council can deploy approximately 400 vessels of various classes within 72 hours. Additional forces are available, but would require longer mobilization periods. 400 ships against 17 simultaneous engagements. Matthew calculated the deployment ratios in his head. You're talking about approximately 25 ships per engagement, assuming equal distribution, against an enemy that's already demonstrated the ability to defeat superior numbers through tactical adaptation. The mathematical assessment is discouraging, Strategic Coordinator Hummel admitted. It's not discouraging. It's impossible. You can't win this war fighting on their terms. Matthew manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific systems and creating new tactical markers. However, you can win this war by changing the terms entirely. Elaborate. The Zephyrians are winning because they're fighting multiple separate engagements simultaneously. Their adaptation advantage works because they can analyze each engagement individually and develop specific countermeasures. But what if instead of 17 separate battles, we force them to fight one massive engagement where their adaptation advantage becomes a weakness? The alien military commanders exchanged glances, at least those capable of glancing did so. Strategic Coordinator Hummel's environmental suit remained inscrutable, but the other indicators suggested intense interest. You propose concentrating our forces? Admiral THYSS asked. That would leave 14 worlds completely undefended. No. I propose making the defense of 3 worlds so costly that the Zephyrians realize they can't afford to attack the other 14. Matthew's fingers danced across the holographic controls, restructuring the tactical display to show his proposed deployment. Instead of spreading Council forces across 17 worlds, he concentrated them into 3 massive defensive networks around strategically chosen systems. These 3 systems control the primary hyperspace routes into Council space. Force the Zephyrians to attack them. Make the cost of victory so horrific that they're forced to reconsider their entire strategic approach. Major, that would require us to essentially sacrifice 14 worlds to save 3, High Commander Zeph Carr pointed out. No, Commander, it would require you to choose which 3 worlds you want to remain inhabited by their original populations rather than converted into biomechanical processing centers. Because of your current loss rate, you're going to lose all 17 anyway. The brutal mathematics of the situation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every military commander in the group understood the logic, but accepting it required abandoning the fundamental principles that govern Council civilization. There is another factor to consider, Ambassador Veltar said quietly. The Zephyrians have demonstrated limited precognitive abilities through their psychic warriors. They have been able to predict our battle plans and troop movements with disturbing accuracy. Matthew's expression grew thoughtful. Precognitive abilities. That's how they've been staying ahead of your tactical adaptations. They don't just analyze your current behavior. They predict your future behavior. Precisely. Even if we adopt more aggressive tactical approaches, they may simply predict and counter them. Ambassador, there's something you need to understand about human psychology. Precognitive abilities work by analyzing behavioral patterns and extrapolating likely future actions. They're basically advanced probability calculations based on observed tendencies. Matthew smiled grimly. Humans are really bad at predictable behavior. We have a cultural tradition of doing stupid, illogical things just because someone told us they were impossible. If their psychics try to predict human behavior, they're going to get probability cascades that look like mathematical seizures. Strategic Coordinator Hummel's speakers crackled. You are suggesting that human unpredictability represents a tactical advantage against precognitive opponents? I'm suggesting that human unpredictability represents a tactical advantage against any opponent. But against precognitive opponents, it's a devastating psychological weapon. Imagine being able to see the future clearly for centuries, then, suddenly, encountering a species whose next action might be anything from brilliant strategy to suicidal charge simply because they thought it would be interesting. The idea seemed to percolate through the group of alien commanders like a slow poison. The concept of deliberately embracing unpredictability as a tactical doctrine was so foreign to their orderly minds that they struggled to process its implications. Major, the Council authorizes immediate deployment of human forces under your command, Ambassador Veltar said formally. What are your requirements? I need complete tactical autonomy for human units, unrestricted access to Council intelligence data, and authorization to deploy any weapon systems I deem necessary for mission success. Granted, I also need to know that when human forces engage the enemy using human tactics, the Council won't second-guess our methods. War crimes by your standards might be Tuesday by ours, remember? The pause that followed was filled with unspoken communication between the Council representatives. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke. Major Ridgway. The Council formally authorizes human military forces to engage the Zephyrian threat using any methods deemed necessary for victory. We understand that human approaches to warfare may differ significantly from Council doctrine. Ambassador, that's the most diplomatic way anyone has ever told me I have permission to commit atrocities. I appreciate the trust. Matthew activated his personal communication system, establishing a direct link to the 2nd Human Expeditionary Force staging area. Colonel Chen's face appeared on the small display, her expression professionally neutral. Colonel, are we ready to introduce humanity to galactic warfare? Sir, the 2nd Expeditionary is fully deployed and awaiting orders. All experimental weapons systems are operational. The aliens wanted humanity unleashed. They're about to discover what that means. Excellent. Transmit our coordinates to Admiral Harrison. I want the entire force here within 48 hours. Understood, sir. ETA on human arrival at Nexus Station is 46 hours. The communication ended, leaving Matthew alone with his alien counterparts. The holographic tactical display continued, showing the red zones of Zephyrian conquest spreading across Council space like a malignant growth. Gentlemen, Admiral, the next few days are going to change everything you think you know about warfare. I hope you're prepared for that. High Commander Zefkar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Major, what should we expect from human military doctrine? Matthew smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Nexus Station, he felt genuinely optimistic about their chances. Commander, human military doctrine is based on a very simple principle. If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. We're about to teach the galaxy that there's no such thing as fighting dirty when the survival of civilization is at stake. The alien commanders exchanged glances again, and Matthew could practically see them trying to process the implications of unleashing a species whose entire approach to warfare was based on rejecting the concept of fair play. The Zephyrians had conquered 14 worlds by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than their enemies. They were about to discover that humans didn't try to be smarter or faster. Humans just tried to win, and they had spent centuries perfecting the art of making victory inevitable through sheer bloody-minded determination and tactical creativity. The war was about to become very interesting. The arrival of the 2nd Human Expeditionary Force at Nexus Station was unlike anything the Council species had ever witnessed. Where their own fleets moved in perfect formations with mathematical precision, the human ships emerged from hyperspace in what appeared to be complete chaos. Vessels scattered across a volume of space, so large that some were barely visible on long-range sensors. Major Matthew Ridgway watched from Nexus Station's command center as his alien counterparts tried to make sense of human deployment doctrine. High Commander Zefkar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he studied the tactical displays, while Admiral Tetris's large eyes tracked individual human vessels with growing confusion. Major, your fleet formation appears to lack any organized structure, Strategic Coordinator Hummel observed through his environmental suit speakers. Are your commanders experiencing navigation difficulties? Matthew suppressed a smile. No, coordinate. That's intentional. Human doctrine calls it tactical dispersion. makes it impossible for enemy forces to predict our concentration points or target our command structure. But how do you coordinate attacks without maintaining formation cohesion? Admiral THYSS asked. Simple. We don't coordinate attacks. We coordinate objectives and let individual commanders determine their own methods for achieving them. The concept seemed to cause actual physical distress among the council representatives. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features shifted through several configurations that Matthew had learned indicated deep confusion. Major, how can you maintain strategic control without centralized coordination? Ambassador, centralized coordination assumes you know what you're going to encounter and can plan accordingly. Against an adaptive enemy with precognitive abilities, centralized planning becomes a liability. Every plan you make is another data point they can use to predict your behavior. Colonel Sarah Chin's voice crackled through the communication system from her flagship, the UES Indomitable. Major, the second expeditionary is fully deployed and ready for immediate engagement. All experimental systems are operational and standing by. Colonel, proceed to the Kepler 442 system for our demonstration. Full-spectrum warfare authorization is in effect. Understood, sir. Time to show the galaxy how humans say hello. The communication ended, and Matthew turned to address his alien counterparts. Gentlemen, Admiral, Coordinator, you're about to witness human military doctrine in action. I suggest you pay close attention, because in 6 hours, everything you think you know about warfare is going to become obsolete. High Commander Zefkar's carapace plates shifted defensively. Major, the Kepler 442 system is currently under siege by a full Zephyrian assault fleet. Intelligence estimates suggest they have deployed over 60 vessels and multiple bioweapon platforms. Perfect. That should make for an adequate demonstration. The tactical hologram updated to show the Kepler 442 system in real time. The human fleet was still scattered across an impossible volume of space. Individual ships moving in patterns that seemed to defy any rational strategic purpose. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian forces maintained their typical formation, highly organized bioships arranged in complex geometric patterns that maximize their adaptive capabilities. Major, Admiral THYSS said quietly, "Are you certain this approach is wise? The Zephyrians have proven capable of adapting to any tactical doctrine within minutes of initial engagement. Admiral, they've proven capable of adapting to rational tactical doctrine. What you're about to see isn't rational." The human ships began their attack run, and immediately, every tactical principle the Council had ever learned about warfare was violated simultaneously. Instead of concentrating their forces for maximum effect, the humans attacked from 17 different vectors at once. Instead of targeting military assets first, they bypassed the Zephyrian fleet entirely and began bombarding the planet's surface. Major, what are your forces doing? Strategic Coordinator Hummel demanded. They're ignoring the enemy fleet. No, coordinate. They're making the enemy fleet irrelevant. The tactical display showed the devastating effectiveness of the human approach. While the Zephyrians tried to predict human movements and adapt their formations accordingly, they found themselves attempting to counter attacks that were coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Every time they repositioned to meet one threat, 3 more appeared from unexpected directions. "This is chaos," High Commander Zefkar observed. "Controlled chaos," Matthew corrected. "There's a difference. Chaos with purpose behind it." On the tactical display, human vessels were deploying weapons that the Council had never seen before. Biowarfare missiles that released engineered viruses designed to corrupt Zephyrian biotechnology. Quantum disruptors that made precognitive prediction impossible by creating multiple simultaneous probability states. Psychological warfare broadcasts that transmitted pure human aggression directly into the synaptic networks of enemy bioconstructs. Major, were those transmissions? Ambassador Veltar asked as the display showed human ships broadcasting something that was causing visible confusion in the Zephyrian formations. Colonel Chenes Specialty. Psychological warfare. She's transmitting recordings of human battlefield experiences directly into their bioneural networks. Turns out that 3 centuries of human warfare creates some pretty intense psychological patterns. What kind of psychological patterns? Matthew's smile was sharp enough to cut metal. The kind of patterns created by a species that considers nuclear warfare an acceptable tactical option, that has invented weapons designed specifically to maximize suffering rather than just kill efficiently, and that has cultural traditions celebrating last stands against impossible odds. The effect on the Zephyrian forces was immediate and devastating. Their bioconstructs, designed to process and adapt to enemy psychology, found themselves overwhelmed by human mental patterns that included everything from berserker rage to suicidal determination. Ships began functioning erratically as their bioneural networks struggled to process psychological states that had evolved specifically for warfare. The Zephyrian fleet is retreating, Admiral THYSS reported with amazement. They're abandoning the system entirely. No, Matthew corrected, watching the tactical display intently. They're regrouping. This was just first contact. They'll adapt to our psychological warfare within hours and come back with countermeasures. Then, what was the purpose of this engagement? Information gathering. Now we know how they adapt, how fast they adapt, and what kinds of responses they prioritize. More importantly, they now know that humans fight in ways their precognitive abilities can't predict. The tactical display showed the human fleet maintaining their chaotic deployment pattern even after the Zephyrians had withdrawn. Individual ships continued moving in apparently random patterns, making it impossible to predict where they would be at any given moment. Colonel Chun, casualties report, Matthew requested. Minimal, sir. 3 vessels sustained damage, no losses. Enemy casualties unknown, but significant. Their retreat suggests they sustained major psychological trauma to their bioneural networks. Excellent. Begin Phase 2 preparations. Understood, sir. Matthew turned back to his alien counterparts, who were studying the tactical displays with expressions ranging from amazement to horror. Major, High Commander Zeph Carr said slowly, your tactics appear to be completely insane. They are completely insane. That's the point. Sanity is predictable. Insanity with purpose behind it is the most dangerous force in the universe. Strategic Coordinator Hummel's speakers crackled. But how do you maintain unit cohesion when every ship is acting independently? We don't maintain unit cohesion in the traditional sense. We maintain objective cohesion. Every human commander knows the mission goal and has complete tactical autonomy to achieve it. It's actually more effective than centralized command because it eliminates single points of failure. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features had settled into a configuration that Matthew recognized as deep thought. Major, this approach to warfare is fundamentally different from anything in Council military history. Ambassador, Council military history is based on civilized species fighting civilized wars with civilized objectives. Humans learned to fight by killing each other for resources on a planet where everything was trying to kill us anyway. Our entire approach to conflict is based on survival at any cost. The communication system activated again, this time showing the face of Admiral Harrison from Earth Defense Command. The old soldier's scarred features carried their usual expression of professional satisfaction. Matthew, I've been monitoring the engagement. Beautiful work. The political types are asking questions about casualties and collateral damage. Tell them we're fighting a war, not organizing a parade. What's the status on Operation Prometheus? Fully authorized and ready for deployment. The experimental divisions are standing by for your signal. Excellent. We'll need them for the next phase. The communication ended, leaving Matthew alone with his alien counterparts once again. The tactical display continued showing the human fleet maintaining their chaotic deployment, while long-range sensors tracked the retreating Zephyrian forces regrouping at the edge of the system. Major, Admiral THYSS said quietly, what is Operation Prometheus? Admiral, that's the part where we stop playing with the Zephyrians and start demonstrating why humans have spent 3 centuries developing weapons that most civilized species consider war crimes. The uncomfortable silence that followed told Matthew everything he needed to know about how his alien allies were processing the implications of human military doctrine. The Zephyrians are regrouping, High Commander Zefkar reported. Long-range sensors show they're integrating additional bioships into their formation. Estimated strength is now over 100 vessels. Perfect. They're doing exactly what I hoped they would do, which is concentrating their forces to counter human tactical doctrine. They're thinking like machines, identify problem, analyze solution, deploy overwhelming force to eliminate problem. It's exactly the kind of logical response that makes them vulnerable to the next phase. Matthew activated his command console, establishing communications with Colonel Chen's flagship. Colonel, the enemy is massing for a coordinated assault. Recommend we proceed to Prometheus deployment. Sir, are you certain? Prometheus protocols are comprehensive. Colonel, they brought 100 bioships to fight 17 human vessels. I think comprehensive responses are called for. Understood, sir. Prometheus deployment authorized. The tactical display began showing new markers as human ships throughout the system activated weapon systems that had never been used in actual combat. The Experimental Weapons Division had spent decades developing responses to theoretical alien threats, and now those theories were about to be tested against reality. What exactly is Prometheus? Ambassador Veltar asked with obvious apprehension. Ambassador, Prometheus was the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. Operation Prometheus is what happens when humans decide to steal fire from the galaxy and use it to solve our problems. The first indication of what Prometheus actually meant came when human ships began deploying devices that created localized space-time distortions. The Zephyrian fleet found themselves caught in gravity wells that made their bioships function incorrectly, their organic technology unable to adapt to physics that kept changing around them. Temporal warfare, Strategic Coordinator Hummel observed with what might have been awe. That's just the appetizer, Matthew replied. Watch what happens when they try to adapt to the temporal distortions. As the Zephyrian bioships began modifying themselves to compensate for the space-time distortions, human vessels deployed a second wave of weapons, quantum viruses that infected the adaptation process itself, turning the enemy's greatest strength into a cascading weakness. Major, this is terrifying, Admiral THYSS said quietly. Admiral, this is Tuesday. Wait until you see what we do when we're actually trying. The Zephyrian fleet was no longer retreating. They were fleeing in complete disorder as their bioships turned against each other, their adaptation systems compromised by quantum viruses that made beneficial adaptation impossible while accelerating harmful mutations. Colonel Chun, casualty report. 0 human casualties, sir. Enemy fleet is experiencing cascade failure across all bioneural networks. Estimate 90% of their force will be non-functional within the hour. Outstanding. Signal the fleet to begin recovery operations. I want samples of every piece of Zephyrian technology we can salvage. Understood, sir. Matthew turned back to his alien counterparts, who were staring at the tactical displays with expressions that ranged from amazement to existential horror. Gentlemen, Admiral Coordinator, that was a demonstration of human military doctrine against a numerically superior enemy using experimental weapon systems. Any questions? The silence stretched for several moments before High Commander Zefkar spoke. Major, how long have humans been developing these weapon systems? About 3 centuries. We've had a lot of time to think about creative solutions to military problems. And this represents standard human military capability? Matthew's smile was genuinely terrifying. Commander, this represents what happens when humans aren't trying very hard. You haven't seen standard human military capability yet. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features shifted through several configurations before settling on what Matthew had learned indicated resignation mixed with relief. Major Ridgway. The Council formally requests that human forces assume primary responsibility for all military operations against the Zephyrian threat. Ambassador, that's probably the wisest decision the Council has made in centuries. The war was about to become very one-sided, and the Zephyrians were about to discover why the galaxy had spent 300 years keeping humans behind quarantine barriers. Some species are isolated to protect them from the universe. Others are isolated to protect the universe from them. The Zephyrian home system had been the stuff of Council nightmares for months, a hellscape of biomechanical constructs and organic technology that defied every conventional understanding of warfare. Massive bioships the size of small moons orbited a planet that pulsed with malevolent energy, while swarms of smaller vessels patrolled in patterns that seemed to follow some alien mathematical perfection. Major Matthew Ridgway stood on the command deck of the UES Retribution, watching the enemy stronghold through displays that showed tactical information his alien allies still struggled to comprehend. After 6 weeks of systematic human victories across 17 star systems, the war had reached its inevitable conclusion. Humanity had come to the Zephyrian home system to end this threat permanently. Major, long-range sensors are detecting massive enemy formations throughout the system, Colonel Sarachun reported from her tactical station. Conservative estimates suggest they have over 500 bioships of various classifications, plus planetary defense networks that span 3 worlds. Outstanding. They've concentrated their entire remaining force to defend their home system. That makes our job much simpler. Behind Matthew, Ambassador Veltar, and the other council representatives observed the proceedings with the shell-shocked expressions of beings who had watched their understanding of warfare become obsolete in the span of 6 weeks. The systematic efficiency with which humans had dismantled Zephyrian forces across the galaxy had left them struggling to process the implications. Major, High Commander Zefkar said, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy, "Surely you do not intend to assault such a heavily defended position with only the 2nd Expeditionary Force." "Commander, I intend to assault such a heavily defended position with only the 2nd Expeditionary Force and 47 weapon systems that the Zephyrians have never encountered because we invented them last week." Strategic Coordinator Hummel's environmental suit speakers crackled. "You developed new weapons during active combat operations." Coordinator, humans have a cultural tradition of solving problems by hitting them with increasingly large hammers until they stop being problems. The Zephyrians have been very helpful in providing us with problems that required bigger hammers. The tactical display updated to show the human fleet deployment throughout the system. Unlike their earlier chaotic dispersal patterns, the human vessels had arranged themselves in what appeared to be a perfect sphere surrounding the Zephyrian positions. Every ship maintained exact distances from their neighbors, creating a 3-dimensional containment grid that left no possible escape route. "This formation is highly organized," Admiral THYSS observed. "It contradicts your previous tactical doctrine." "Admiral, our previous tactical doctrine was designed to confuse enemies who might escape to fight another day. This tactical doctrine is designed for enemies we never want to see again." Colonel Chen's voice echoed through the command center. "Major, all vessels report ready for Operation Ragnarok. Experimental weapon systems are armed and standing by." "Ragnarok?" Ambassador Veltar asked. "Ambassador, Ragnarok was the end of the world in human mythology. We thought it was an appropriate name for what we're about to do to the Zephyrian war machine." Matthew activated his fleet-wide communications, connecting to every human vessel in the system. Nearly 200 ships representing the accumulated military might of humanity spread across space, each one carrying weapons that had been designed specifically for this moment. "Attention all vessels, this is Major Ridgway. For 6 weeks, we have systematically destroyed every Zephyrian force we encountered. We have liberated 17 star systems and saved billions of lives. Today, we finish what they started when they decided to turn living beings into biomechanical constructs. The channel remained open as Matthew continued. The enemy has concentrated their entire remaining force in this system because they believe their numbers and defensive advantages make them invulnerable. They are about to discover that humans don't care about numbers, defensive advantages, or conventional military doctrine. Across the fleet, human crews made final preparations for an assault that will be studied by military historians for millennia, assuming there were any military historians left to study it. Execute Ragnarok. All vessels, weapons free. What happened next redefined galactic civilization's understanding of total warfare. Instead of attacking the enemy fleet directly, human vessels began deploying weapons that targeted the fundamental principles holding the Zephyrian system together. Quantum cascade bombs that unraveled the atomic bonds holding their bioships together. Temporal displacement weapons that aged enemy vessels thousands of years and seconds. Biological warfare agents that turned Zephyrian adaptation capabilities against themselves, causing their ships to adapt themselves out of existence. Major, what are those devices your ships are deploying? Strategic Coordinator Hummel asked as massive constructs began materializing throughout the system. Stellar engineering platforms. We're going to provide the Zephyrians with a demonstration of human industrial capacity. The massive platforms began their work with mechanical precision that made Council technology look primitive by comparison. They gather matter directly from the system's asteroid belt and began constructing weapons in real time. Factories that built other factories that built increasingly sophisticated implements of destruction. You're building weapons platforms during active combat? High Commander Zefkar asked with amazement. Commander, we're building weapons platforms, defense networks, communication arrays, and a few surprises that should keep any surviving Zephyrians entertained for decades. Humans believe in planning for the future. The Zephyrian response was everything Matthew had hoped for and expected. Their bioships began adapting to counter human weapons, their organic technology shifting and evolving to meet each new threat. It was an impressive display of biological engineering that would have been devastating against any conventional enemy. Unfortunately for the Zephyrians, humans had spent 6 weeks learning exactly how their adaptation process worked, and they had prepared accordingly. Colonel Chun, deploy the adaptation cascades. Sir, are you certain? Once we deploy those, there's no containing the effect. Colonel, we're not here to contain effects. We're here to ensure the Zephyrian threat never threatens galactic civilization again. Understood, sir. Adaptation cascades deploying. The new weapons targeted the Zephyrian adaptation process itself, introducing artificial evolutionary pressures that forced their biotechnology to adapt in directions that made it increasingly unstable. Instead of becoming stronger, Zephyrian ships began consuming themselves in frantic attempts to adapt to problems that didn't actually exist. Major, this is beyond total warfare, Admiral THYSS said quietly. You're conducting evolutionary warfare against their entire species. Admiral, they chose to fight by converting living beings into biomechanical constructs. We're simply returning the favor by converting their biomechanical constructs into very confused organic matter. The tactical display showed the systematic collapse of Zephyrian resistance throughout the system. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for months were destroying themselves in confusion as their adaptation systems received contradictory signals that made beneficial evolution impossible. Major Ridgway. A new voice interrupted through the communication system. The voice carried harmonics that suggested advanced bioengineering and intelligence far beyond baseline human parameters. You have the privilege of addressing the primary collective of the Zephyrian hegemony. We offer terms for cessation of hostilities. Matthew studied the communication signal's origin point, a massive bioconstruct at the center of the Zephyrian formation that pulsed with energy patterns unlike anything they had encountered before. Primary collective, this is Major Ridgway. I'm authorized to accept your unconditional surrender. We do not offer surrender. We offer cessation of expansion in exchange for guaranteed territorial integrity within this system. The arrogance of the statement would have been amusing if it hadn't been so perfectly representative of everything wrong with the Zephyrian approach to conflict resolution. Primary Collective, you seem to be under the impression that you're in a position to negotiate. Allow me to clarify the tactical situation. Matthew gestured, and the tactical display shifted to show the complete scope of human deployments throughout the system. The Zephyrians were surrounded not just by warships, but by construction platforms that were building weapons faster than the enemy could track them. You're currently surrounded by human forces equipped with weapons that make adaptation impossible. Your bioships are destroying themselves, trying to counter threats that exist only in their programming. Your entire fleet is trapped in a containment grid that prevents escape or reinforcement. You threaten us with extinction, human. This violates every galactic convention regarding warfare between sapient species. Primary Collective, galactic conventions regarding warfare became irrelevant the moment you started converting sapient beings into biomechanical constructs. We're simply applying human conventions regarding the appropriate response to species that commit genocide. The communication channel remained silent for several moments. When the Primary Collective spoke again, the harmonic undertones suggested genuine fear. What are human conventions regarding such responses? Matthew's smile was visible to everyone on the command deck, human and alien alike. It was not a particularly reassuring expression. Complete elimination of the threat, followed by comprehensive measures to ensure the threat never recurs. You speak of genocide. Primary Collective, I speak of pest control. The distinction is that pests choose to become problems. Another silence, longer this time. Around the command deck, the council representatives watched with fascination and horror as they witnessed the systematic psychological destruction of an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy. We propose conditional surrender with territorial guarantees. Counterproposal: unconditional surrender with guaranteed survival for any Zephyrian population that agrees to biotechnological modification to eliminate their capacity for adaptation-based warfare. That would fundamentally alter our species. Primary Collective, your species fundamentally altered 12 billion other beings into biomechanical constructs. We're offering you the opportunity to exist as something other than a galactic threat. The alternative is existence as a historical footnote. The tactical display showed increasing chaos throughout the Zephyrian fleet as their bioships continued destroying themselves. The adaptation cascades were working exactly as designed, turning the enemy's greatest strength into an insurmountable weakness. Colonel Chun, status report on planetary targets. Major, the stellar engineering platforms have completed construction of planetary pacification systems. All 3 Zephyrian worlds are now covered by biosuppression networks that prevent large-scale organic technology from functioning. Outstanding. Signal the fleet to prepare for planetary assault if negotiations fail. Understood, sir. The Primary Collective's response came quickly, the harmonic undertones now suggesting complete desperation. We accept unconditional surrender. We request only that our population be permitted to survive. Primary Collective, your population will be permitted to survive after biotechnological modification to ensure you never again pose a threat to galactic civilization. This is non-negotiable. We accept these terms. Matthew nodded to Colonel Chun, who began transmitting ceasefire orders to the human fleet. Around the system, weapons that could have destroyed entire worlds powered down as humanity demonstrated the same tactical precision in victory that they had shown in warfare. Ambassador Veltar, the Zephyrian threat has been neutralized. Human forces will maintain system security until Council representatives arrive to oversee the transition. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features had settled into a configuration that Matthew had never seen before, something that might have been all mixed with existential terror. Major Ridgway, In 6 weeks, human forces have eliminated a threat that the Council believed might require decades to defeat. Ambassador, human forces have eliminated a threat that the Council never could have defeated using Council methods. Sometimes the solution to a civilizational problem requires civilizational tools. High Commander Zefkar's carapace plates were locked in defensive position, a sign that he was struggling to process the complete scope of what he had witnessed. Major, what happens to humanity now? You have demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything in Council military history. Matthew considered the question carefully. Around him, the command deck of the U.S. Retribution hummed with the quiet efficiency of a species that had just solved an impossible problem through the application of controlled violence and tactical creativity. Commander, what happens to humanity is that we go home to Earth and continue developing increasingly sophisticated solutions to problems that haven't been invented yet, but will be available if the galaxy needs us again. Strategic Coordinator Hummel's environmental suit speakers crackled. Major, the Council will undoubtedly want to establish formal military cooperation agreements with human forces. Coordinator, the Council is welcome to establish whatever agreements they feel are necessary. But understand that human military doctrine is based on solving problems permanently. We don't fight wars to manage threats. We fight wars to eliminate them. Admiral Tetrusessa's large eyes focused on Matthew with uncomfortable intensity. Major, do humans pose a threat to galactic civilization? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Matthew understood that his answer would determine humanity's place in galactic society for generations to come. Admiral, humans pose a threat to anything that threatens galactic civilization. We're the species you call when the problems are too big, too dangerous, or too insane for anyone else to handle. That makes us either your greatest asset or your worst nightmare, depending on which side of the problem you're standing on. The communication system activated one final time, showing the face of Admiral Harrison from Earth Defense Command. The old soldier's scarred features carried an expression of professional satisfaction. Matthew, outstanding work. The politicians want to know when the second expeditionary will be returning to Earth. Sir, mission complete. We'll be home within the month. Excellent. Try to remember that the galaxy is going to be watching how we handle victory. Let's make sure they understand that humans fight to protect civilization, not to replace it. Understood, sir. The communication ended, leaving Matthew alone with his thoughts and the slowly cooling aftermath of humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. Around the Zephyrian system, human vessels began the process of withdrawal and cleanup, leaving behind monitoring stations and defense networks that would ensure this threat never arose again. The war that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was over. It had ended not through diplomatic negotiation or gradual attrition, but through the systematic application of human military doctrine to problems that required permanent solutions. The galaxy had learned that humanity could be trusted to solve impossible problems. The galaxy had also learned that some problems are solved by species that other civilizations keep behind quarantine barriers not to protect them from the universe, but to protect the universe from them. Major Matthew Ridgway stood on the command deck of the U.S. Retribution, watching the stars beyond the Zephyrian system, and smiled. Humanity was going home, but they would never again be the isolated species hiding behind Earth's quarantine barriers. They were the galaxy's problem solvers now, and the universe would never be quite the same